a bigger game between a Russian president who has been at the helm since 2000, and a new U.S. president who is a familiar face. There was that Tuesday phone call between Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden, the White House stating that President Biden, quote, emphasized the United States' unwavering commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. A lot to say about that phone call, Brian Taylor. First of all, the fact that it happened, the fact that it's been followed up by the invitation sent to the U.S. ambassador to Russia to attend a meeting at the Kremlin this Wednesday, the fact that Biden is talking about a summit at a neutral venue, and again, the fact that they didn't bring up Alexei Navalny at any point.
Yes, I think this was a good step by President Biden to reach out to President Putin at this point and try and once again signal that the U.S. is committed, as you just said, to Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty, but also to try and maybe unwind things a bit and try and get some kind of dialogue going between Moscow and Washington. President Biden, I think, understands that relations between Moscow and Washington are going to continue to be difficult, and I think President Putin understands that as well. But I think they both also believe there is some benefit in talking about certain issues. The ones that Joe Biden mentioned include arms control, they include climate change, include Afghanistan, Iran. So there's plenty to talk about. And the last time there was a Russian-American summit was 2018 in Helsinki with President Trump. And as people will recall, that one was pretty disastrous from the American side, given how President Trump disavowed the findings of his own intelligence community. So I think a summit with Joe Biden will be very different. I don't think they'll expect to get much out of it in terms of deliverables, but it'll be worth them having a chance to communicate directly with each other if the summit takes place.
Are you surprised?
Moscow has not yet
Are you surprised that the phone call happened in view of the fact that it's just a few weeks after Biden had that interview with ABC News where he said that Putin's a killer, prompting the Russian president to recall his ambassador?
No, I wasn't that surprised that the White House decided it was a good time to reach out. I'll remind viewers that Washington has been on the phone a lot this last week with Kiev, with Berlin, with Paris, talking to our allies, talking to other parties. Many people in the Biden administration have also been talking to their counterparts in Moscow, including the chief of the general staff and the chair of the American Joint Chiefs of Staff. So I think that's part of what we'll see with Biden administration diplomacy, believing it's important to keep all of these channels open. And the people who advise Joe Biden, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, they're all committed Atlanticists and believe that it's important to strengthen NATO after the weakening it suffered, quite frankly, when Donald Trump was president.
There's the chair of the Russian Parliament's upper house's Foreign Affairs Committee, Mark Sloboda, quoted as saying, Russia is now getting the respect it deserves. It was a very important step forward, news on a global scale. With this phone call, you agree with those words? And is there the feeling, as it's been portrayed in some outlets, that it was Biden who blinked first?
No, not at all. That's entirely really a U.S. presentation, this idea that Biden blinked for, beating the drums of neo-McCarthyism and Russophobia in Washington, trying to portray Biden as soft on Russia, just like they tried to portray Trump that way. You'll notice that Moscow actually hasn't responded yet. What they have responded is that if the U.S. Resorts to another round of sanctions, and there have been some 80 packages of sanctions over the last several years against Russia, that Russia will take decisive action, and particularly when the U.S. is at the same time trying to make a gesture of improving relations with Russia, meaning we need Russia's help with some things in the world. So we'll continue to slap them with one hand while we, pretend, to be reaching out our hand on the other hand to them. And there's no appetite for this in the country. And I think there's very little appetite.
So how should Vladimir Putin handle Joe Biden?
I think for right now, the best that the U.S. and Russia can do for the next several years to avoid a further deterioration in relations is to continue the political and economic decoupling of Russia from the U.S. and the West, and to go our separate ways, as it were. I don't believe there can be any real improvement of relations with, the continued U.S. military occupation of East Syria, with the continued military.
So wait, you're saying go back to the Cold War era when the two sides didn't have much contact, not much trade?
There was more rules of the road, and there was more respect for both sides during the Cold War than there is right now, and there has been for the last several years. We're already in a new arms race. The U.S. has pulled out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the Open Skies Treaty. All that architecture is in tatters. To his credit, Biden did renew the last foundation pillar, the New START Treaty. So the new arms race is qualitative, not quantitative, thank God, at this point. But I think there's very little constructive we can do for the next several years. Maybe we'll see a change of administration in the United States. Maybe we'll see a change of administration in Russia. But right now, until we see movement in these hotspots, in Syria with the U.S. withdrawing from the country, in Ukraine with the U.S.-backed Kiev regime finally, sitting down, talking with the political representatives in Donbass and fulfilling the UN Security Council solidified Minsk Accords, which they have basically said they are pulling out of.